38. Annabeth. The most insulting part. The Draken was easily the most beautiful thing Annabeth had ever seen since she'd fallen into Tartarus. Its hide was dappled green and yellow like sunlight through a forest canopy. Its reptilian eyes were Annabeth's favourite shade of sea green, just like Percy's. When its frill unfurled around its head, Annabeth couldn't help but think what a rageful and amazing monster it was that was about to kill her. It was easily as long as a subway train. Its massive talons dug into the mud as it pulled itself forward, its tail whipping from side to side. The Draken hissed, spitting jets of green poison that smoked on the mossy ground and set tar pits on fire, filling the air with the scent of fresh pine and ginger. The monster even smelled good like most dragons. It was wingless, longer and more snake-like than a dragon, and it looked hungry. "Bob," Annabeth said, "what are we facing here?" Maeonian Draken, Bob said, "from Maeonia." More help and information, Annabeth would have smacked Bob upside the head with his own broom if she could lift it. "Anyway, we can't kill it," Bob said. "No." The Draken roared as if to accentuate the point, filling the air with more pine and ginger poison, which would have made an excellent car freshness scent. "Get Percy to safety," Annabeth said. "I'll distract it." She had no idea how she would even do that, but it was her only choice. She couldn't let Percy die, not if she still had the strength to stand. "You don't have to," Bob said. "Any minute." Annabeth turned as the giant emerged from his hut. He was about 20 feet tall, typical giant height, with a humanoid upper body and scaly reptilian legs. Like a bipedal dinosaur, he held no weapon instead of armor. He wore only a shirt stitched together from sheep hide and green spotted leather. His skin was cherry red, his beard and hair the color of iron rust, braided with tufts of grass leaves and swamp flowers. He shouted and chatted, but thankfully he wasn't looking at Annabeth. Bob pulled her out of the way as the giant stormed towards the Draken. They clashed like some sort of weird Christmas combat scene. The red versus the green. Draken spewed poison. The giant lunged to one side. He grabbed the oak tree and pulled it from the ground, roots and all. The old skull crumbled to dust as the giant hefted the tree like a baseball bat. The Draken's tail lashed around the giant's waist, dragging him closer to its gnashing teeth. But as soon as the monster was enraged, he shoved the tree straight down the monster's throat. Annabeth hoped she'd never had to see such a gruesome scene again. The tree pierced the Draken's gullet and impaled it on the ground. The roots began to move, digging deeper as they touched the earth, anchoring the oak until it looked like it had stood in that spot for centuries. The Draken shook and thrashed, but it was pinned fast. The giant brought its fist down on the Draken's neck. Crack! The monster went limp. It began to dissolve, leaving only scraps of bone, meat, hide, and a new Draken skull, whose open jaws ringed the oak tree. Bob grunted. "Good one." The kitten purred in agreement and started cleaning his paws. The giant kicked at the Draken's remains, examining them critically. "No good bones," he complained. "I wanted a new walking stick." "Humph! Some good skin for the outhouse, though." He ripped some soft hide from the Draken's frills and tucked it in his belt. Annabeth wanted to ask if the giant really used Draken hide for the toilet paper, but she decided against it. Bob, do you want to introduce us?" Annabeth, Bob patted Percy's leg. "This is Percy." Annabeth hoped the title was just messing with her. though Bob's face revealed nothing. She regretted her teeth. I met the giant you promised he could help. Promise? The giant glanced over from his work. His eyes narrowed under his bushy red brows. A big thing, a promise. Why would Bob promise my help? Bob shifted his weight. Titans were scary, but Annabeth had never seen one next to a giant before. Compared to the Draken Killer, Bob looked downright runty. Damascene is a good giant, Bob said. He is peaceful. He can cure poisons. Annabeth watched the giant Damascene, who was now ripping chunks of bloody meat from the Draken's carcass with his bare hands. Peaceful, she said. Yeah, I can see that. Good meat for dinner. Damascene stood up straight and studied Annabeth, as if she were another potentially source of protein. Come inside. We'll have stew. We'll have stew. Then we will see about this promise. Chapter 39. Annabeth. Cozy. Annabeth never thought she would describe anything in terms that was that way, but despite the fact the giant's hut was as big as planetarium and constructed of bones, mud and dragon skin, definitely felt cozy. In the centre blazed a bonfire, made of pitch and bone, yet the smoke was white and odorless, rising through the hole in the middle of the ceiling. The floor was covered with dry marsh grass and grey wool rugs. At one end lay a massive bed of sheepskin and a draken leather. At the other end, 3 standing racks were hung with cured leather, and what looked like stripes of draken jerky. The whole place smelled of stew, smoke, basil, and thyme. The only thing that worried Annabeth was the flock of sheep huddled in a pen at the back of the hut. Annabeth remembered the cave of Polyphemus. The Cyclops, who ate demigods and sheep indiscriminately. She wondered if giants had similar tastes. Part of her was tempted to run, but Bob had already placed Percy in the giant's bed, where he nearly disappeared in the wood and leather. Small Bob hopped off Percy and netted the blankets. Purring so strong that the bed rattled like 1,000 finger messages. Damascene plodded to the bonfire. He tossed his draken meat into a hanging pot that seemed to be made from an old monster skull, and picked up a ladle and began to stir. Annabeth didn't want to be the next ingredient in his stew, but she'd come here for a reason. She could breathe and march to Damascene. My friend is dying. Can you cure him or not? Her voice caught on the word friend. Percy was a lot more than that. Even boyfriend really didn't cover it. They'd been through so much together. At this point, Percy was part of her, and sometimes annoying part. Sure, definitely a part she could not live without. Damascene looked down at her, glowing under his bushy red eyebrows. Annabeth had met large, scary humanoids before, but Damascene unsettled her in a different way. He didn't seem hostile. He radiated sorrow and bitterness, as if he was so wrapped up in his own misery that he resented Annabeth for trying to make him focus on anything else. I don't hear words like those in Starvers. The giant grumbled. Friend, promise. Annabeth crossed her arms. How about Gordon's blood? Can you cure that, or did Bob overstate your talents? Angering a 20-foot tall draken? Slayer probably wasn't wise strategy. But Percy was dying. She didn't have time for diplomacy. Damazin scowled at her. You question my talents? A half-dead mortal struggles in my swamp and questions my talents? Yep, she said. Humph, Damazin handed Bob the ladle. Stir. And Bob tended the stew. Damazin pursued his drying wax, plucking feathers, leaves and roots. He put a fistful of plant material into his mouth and chewed it up, then spat it into a clump of wood. Cup up both, Damazin ordered. Bob ladled some stew juice into a hollow gourd. He handed it to Damazin, who dunked the chewed up gunk ball and stirred it with his finger. Gorgon's blood, he muttered. Hardly a challenge for my talents. He jumped to the side and propped up Percy with one hand. Small Bob the kitten sniffled the broth and hissed. He scratched the sheets with his paws like he wanted to bury it. You're going to feed him that, Annabeth? The giant glared at her. Who is the healer here? You? Annabeth shut her mouth. She watched as the giant made Percy sip the broth. Damazin handled him with surprising gentleness, murmuring words of encouragement that she couldn't quite catch. With each sip, Percy's colour improved. He drained the cup and his eyes fluttered open. He looked around with a dazed expression, spotted Annabeth and gave her a drunken grin. Feel great? His eyes rolled up in his head and fell back into bed and began to snore. A few hours of sleep, Damazin pronounced. He'll be as good as new. Annabeth sobbed with relief. Thank you, she said. Damazin stared at her mournfully. Oh, don't thank me. You're still doomed, and I require payment for my services. Annabeth's mouth went dry. What sort of payment? A story. The giant's eyes glittered. Gets boring in the towers. You can tell me your story while we eat, eh? Annabeth felt uneasy telling a giant about their plans. Still, Damazin was a good host. He'd saved Percy with dragon meat stew. Was excellent, especially compared to fire and water. His hut was warm and comfortable, and for the first time since plunging into Tartarus, Annabeth felt like she could to relax, which was ironic since she was having dinner with a titan and a giant. He told Damazin about her life and her adventure with Percy. She explained how Percy had met Bob, wiped his memory in the river Leith, and left him in the care of Hades. Percy was trying to do something good, she promised Bob. He didn't know Hades would be such a creep. Even to her, it didn't sound convincing. Hades was always a creep. She thought about what the arrow had said, how Nico the Anglo had been the only person to visit Bob in the palace, in the underworld. Nico was the only Nico was one of the best, least encouraging, Nico was the least outgoing, least friendly demigods Annabeth knew. Yet he'd been kind to Bob by convincing Bob that Percy was a friend. Nico inadvertently saved their lives. Annabeth wondered if she would ever figure that guy out. Bob washed his bowl with a squirt bottle and rag. Damazin made a rolling gesture with his spoon. Continue your story, Annabeth Chase. She explained about their quest in Argo 2 when she got to the part about stopping. Gay from Waking, she faltered. She's your mum, right? Damazin scrapped his bowl. His face was so covered with old poison burns, gouges and scarcishes, so it looked like the surface of an asteroid. Yes, he said, and Tartarus is my father, he gestured from the hut. As you can see, I was a disappointment to my parents. They expected more from me. Annabeth couldn't quite wrap her mind around the fact that she was sharing soup with a 20-foot-tall, lizard-legged man whose parents were Earth and the pit of darkness. Olympian gods were hard enough to imagine as parents, but at least they resembled to humans. The old primordial gods, like Gaia and Tartarus. How could you leave home and ever be independent of your parents when they literally encompass the entire world? So, she said, you don't mind us fighting your mum? Damazin snorted like a bull. Best of luck at present. It's my father you should worry about. With him, Opposing you, you have no chance to survive. Suddenly, Annabeth didn't feel so hungry. She put her bowl on the floor. A small boy came over to check it out. Telling us how, she asked. All of this, Emerson crackled like a dragon bone. All you is a splinter and a toothpick. All you see is the body of Tataris, or at least one manifestation of it. He knows you are here. He tries to thwart your progress at every step. My brethren hunt you. It is remarkable you have lived this long, even with the help of OLYMPUS. Bob scowled when he heard his name. The defeated ones hunt us, yes. They will be close behind now. Damson spat out his toothpick. I can obscure your path for a while, long enough for your rest. I have power in this swamp, but eventually they will catch you. My friend must reach the doors of death, Bob said. That is the way out. Impossible, Damson muttered. The doors are too well guarded. Annabeth sat forward, but you know where they are. Of course, all of Tataris flow down to one place, his heart. The doors of death are there, but you cannot make it alive with only OLYMPUS. Then come with us, Annabeth said. Help us. Ha! Annabeth jumped in the bed, and Percy muttered deliciously in his sleep. Ha, ha, ha. Child of the Thunder, the giant said. I am not your friend. I helped mortals once, and you see where it got me. You helped mortals? Annabeth knew a lot about Greek legends, but she drew a total blank on the name Damson. I don't understand. Bad story, Bob explained. Good giants have bad stories. Damson was created to oppose Ares. Yes, the giant agreed, like all my brethren. I was born to answer a certain god. My foe was Ares, but Ares was the god of war, and so when I was born, he was his opposite, Annabeth. You were peaceful. Peaceful for a giant, at least, Damson sighed. I wandered the fields of Maeonia, in the land of you now called Turkey. I tended my sheep and collected my herbs. It was a good life, but I would not fight the gods. My mother and my father cursed me for that. Final insult, one day Maeonia dragon killed a human shepherd, a friend of mine, so I hunted the creature down and slew its thrusting tree straight through its mouth. I used the power of earth to regrow the tree's roots, planted the dragon firmly in the ground. I'll make sure it will terrorize mortals no more. That was a deed Gaia could not forgive. Because you helped someone? Yes, Damson looked ashamed. Gaia had opened the earth, and I was consumed, exiled here, in the belly of my father, Cyrus. But all useless flotsam collected, all the bits of creation he does not care for. The giant plucked a flower out of his hair and regarded it absently. They let me live tending my sheep, collecting my herbs, so I might know my father you should worry about. With him opposing you, you have no chance to survive. Suddenly, Annabeth didn't feel so hungry. She put her bowl on the floor. Small Bob came over to check it out. Opposing us how? She asked. What is this? Damson crackled. A dragon bone, and used a simple. All you see is the body of Tataris. So I might know the uselessness of the life I chose. Every day I walk past it for a day in this lightless place. The Maeonia dragon reforms and attacks me, killing it. Killing it is my endless task. Annabeth gazed around the hut, trying to imagine how many aeons Damson had been exiled here, slaying the dragon, collecting its bones and hide and meat. Knowing he would attack again the next day, she could barely imagine surviving a week in Tataris, exiling your own son here for centuries. That was beyond cruel. Break the curse, she blurted out. Come with us. Damson chuckled sourly. As simple as that. Don't you think I have tried to leave this place? It is impossible. No matter which direction I travel, I end up here again. The swamp is the only thing I know, the only destination I can imagine. No little demigod, my curse has overtaken me. I have no hope left. No hope, Bob echoed. There must be a way, Annabeth couldn't stand the expression on the giant's face. It reminded her of her own father. 3 times he'd confessed to her that she still loved her feather. He had looked sad and defeated, wishing for something he knew was impossible. Bob has a plan to reach the doors of death, she insisted. He said we could hide in some sort of death mist. Death mist, Darcy said. You take them to Achilles. It's the only way, Bob said. You will die, Darcy said painfully. In darkness, Achilles trusts no one, and helps no one. Bob looked like he wanted to argue, but he pressed his lips together and remained silent. Is there another way, Annabeth asked? No, Darcy said. That is the best plan. Unfortunately, it is a terrible plan. Annabeth felt like she was hanging over the grip. Over the pit again, unable to pull herself up, unable to maintain her grip, left with no good options. But isn't it worth trying, she asked. You can return to the mortal world. You can see the sun again. Demonstran's eyes were like the sockets of the dragon's skull, dark and hollow, devoid of hope. He flickered a broken bone into the fire and rose to his full height, a massive red warrior, and in sheepskin and dragon leather with dried flowers and herbs in his hair. Annabeth could see how he was anti-Ares, Ares the worst god, blustery and violent. Darcy was the best giant, kind and helpful, and for that he'd been cursed to eternal torment. Get some sleep, said the giant. I will prepare supplies for your journey. I am sorry, but I cannot do more. Annabeth wanted to argue, but as soon as he said sleep, her body betrayed her despite her resolution never to sleep into the house again. Her belly was full. The fire made a pleasant crackling sound, and the herbs in the air reminded her of the hills around Camp Half-Blood in summer. For the Saturdays and May-days gathered wild plants in the lazy afternoon. Maybe a little sleep, she agreed. Bob scooped her up like a rag doll. She didn't protest. He sat next to Percy on the giant's bed, and he closed her eyes.